Starting from the middle of autumn, alarming signals began to circulate in diplomatic and intelligence circles. China is preparing to use a weapon that Donald Trump has always considered taboo for himself: a complete ban on the export of a whole range of rare earth minerals to the United States. According to insiders in Beijing and representatives of Western intelligence services, Beijing intends to use its monopoly on critically important materials as a strategic lever of pressure. There is no official decision yet, but warnings have already been transmitted through closed diplomatic channels. If Washington is not ready to make concessions, China reserves the right to temporarily restrict supplies. Sources in the headquarters of major analytical centers claim that preparations for this step have been underway not for months, but for quarters. It should be recalled that Trump announced the introduction of 100% tariffs on Chinese imports, effective from the 1st of November. This marked the beginning of another round of trade confrontation, and Washington expected to strike at China's key export industries. However, China restrained its reaction until now. But now, apparently, they are ready to act proactively. If China imposes real restrictions on the export of rare earth minerals, lanthanides, neodymium, cerium, and others, the consequences for the United States could be catastrophic. China controls about 90% of the world's mining and processing of these materials. Without them, the production of modern electronics, advanced chips, weapons control systems, electric vehicles, and laser systems is impossible. Almost the entire technological backbone of American industry would become vulnerable. In the Pentagon, according to anonymous sources, options are already being considered for accelerated search for alternative suppliers in Australia, India, and Africa, as well as speeding up programs for secondary processing and creating synthetic substitutes. But even in the most optimistic scenario, they are unlikely to offset the blow in the short term. It is interesting how Trump will respond. He has repeatedly demonstrated his readiness for tough maneuvers, imposing tariffs, blocking Chinese companies, sanctioning key Chinese technology firms. But a ban on minerals is a completely different level of escalation. If he responds symmetrically, for example, by imposing sanctions on Chinese technology giants, restricting the export of American technologies, banning Chinese companies from transactions in the United States, this could turn the trade war into a full-scale technological conflict. Respected publications such as Financial Times, The Wall Street Journal, and The New York Times have already published analytical articles warning that China views its mineral card as its last means of pressure, a reserve that has been kept secret for a long time. Insiders from a company in the mining industry claim that ministries in Beijing began preparing internal regulations and directives months ago in case negotiations with the United States reached an impasse. Now the whole world is watching who will make the first fatal move. America still holds its trump cards: a second wave of sanctions, technological embargoes, divestment of Chinese assets in the United States. But all this may not be enough if China decides to push for a full export ban. If this step happens, we will find ourselves on the threshold of a new stage of global confrontation. Not just economic, but technological and geopolitical. And too much is at stake in this game. Leadership in semiconductors, control over 5G and 6G infrastructure, the defense industry, the future of electric vehicles and renewable energy. The world is already holding its breath, because the balance of power for decades to come may depend on who strikes first. Experts believe that the current situation is the most dangerous in decades. China, in fact, holds in its hands the nervous system of the entire global technological industry. When in 2010 Beijing first restricted the export of rare earth elements to Japan, world prices for these metals skyrocketed 20-fold. Back then it looked like a local conflict, but if China now applies a similar strategy against the United States, the effect will be incomparably larger. What is at stake is not individual contracts, but the foundation of the entire global supply chain. American companies such as Apple, Tesla, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and General Electric have already begun analyzing the risks. According to sources in Hong Kong business circles, several large corporations have received unofficial warnings from Chinese suppliers about possible temporary disruptions in shipments starting in November. The wording is for technical reasons, but experts understand that this is a political signal. The Chinese are acting with their usual strategic subtlety. Beijing is not making sharp statements, but every move is calculated. State media have begun publishing articles about the need to protect national interests and natural resources. This is a clear hint that the country is ready to rationalize exports, meaning to reduce them. At the same time, an official representative of the Ministry of Commerce of the People's Republic of China stated that China has always supported the stability of global supply chains, but will never allow itself to be used as a tool of pressure. This is a typical Chinese diplomatic formulation. There is no threat, but the message is clear. Washington fully understands the scale of the threat. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, China can paralyze up to 70% of the American advanced technology market if it restricts the supply of just 5 key minerals, including dysprosium, terbium, neodymium, praseodymium, and yttrium. These are used in missile guidance systems, magnets for electric motors, and microchip production. Without these materials, even the guidance systems of American F-35 fighters will not work. For the Trump administration, this could become a moment of truth. The White House is currently discussing several response scenarios, from turning to strategic reserves to temporarily lifting some sanctions on other supplier countries such as Myanmar and Vietnam. But that is not enough. Even if the United States urgently launches its own few mines at full capacity, the extraction, processing, and refining of rare earth elements take months, if not years. America is simply not prepared for a total mineral blockade. Meanwhile, Chinese financial markets are reacting calmly. The yuan remains stable, gold prices are rising, and Chinese stock indices show cautious growth. Experts from South China Morning Post note that unlike previous rounds of the trade war, Beijing now feels confident. It has the resilience and economic foundation it lacked in 2018. Back then, the Chinese economy depended on the export of electronics and textiles. And today, its base is the production of batteries, solar panels, drones, and semiconductors, precisely the industries where rare earth elements play a decisive role. And if Trump hoped that tariffs would weaken China, now the situation is reversed. The United States is the vulnerable side. In recent days, Reuters and Bloomberg, citing their sources in trade departments, have reported that the White House is seriously considering turning to Canada and Australia for emergency supplies. But even together, these countries can cover no more than 8 to 10% of U.S. needs. The problem is further compounded by the fact that China can use the rare earth crisis as a tool of diplomatic blackmail. According to rumors, Beijing has already sent signals through closed channels to European countries, Japan, and South Korea that restrictions will apply only to those states that support U.S. sanctions. This is a subtle move to divide Trump's allies and force them to choose between economic interests and political loyalty. In Europe, this prospect is already causing panic. German car manufacturers are sounding the alarm. Without Chinese materials, electric vehicle factories will grind to a halt, and the European Commission is not yet ready to offer a solution. Against this shadow hanging over the global economy, experts warn, we are standing on the threshold of a new technological Cold War, not at the level of slogans, but at the level of atoms. Literally, whoever controls the elements controls the future. The United States still hopes that China will not dare to take the extreme step, since it would also hurt Beijing itself. The export of rare earth minerals brings in billions of dollars. But under current conditions, China is ready to sacrifice profit for strategic advantage. That is why in Washington they say the coming weeks may be the most intense in the history of US-China relations.